Tene Tatring Hadu Chala Tanda Sonju Chusun Tatingla Dipig Dipatan, Tene taken the Paru to Simbajola Dipati, Hubarella, Togunga Cassia, Satiola Dipati, Bongu Pertembarella. Tene Cerdo Satio te Tanda Jitang ta Satomborat Gawane Satio Chuchitana Toga Parto Tati Tonon Gonlon Jakaji Satio Yuarel. Tene Satio te la Paru to Simbacho Dugiore la Tene Satombola Jimbe Paru to Simbazo Sanibala Trimji Paru to Simbazo Tatin Dogi Yuarella. Tene Cerdo Satombola Satamboni Remigendo Kundun Rodan Chugatan Juntin Tanjin Chuni Ton Yonsun Zamba Medan Ton J Nom Tadi Medan Tansi Tasa Tambarat Gawatela Chuin Kundun Rodan Chetawa Gendo Topala Dipin Tomponganyam Batenzo Panguria Pachaitan Nisa Nibala Trinji Paru the Zamba Zopagachena Chugatan La Dipa Surim Chalwala Sopatante Pang Nangia Pachaitan Nisa Sumbala Zeba Paru the Zamba Zoba in Becherna Juntin Tanjin Chuni Tansi Jodan Tamba Tanjin Chuni the Churba Zeba Paru the Zamba Zoba Tene Tatanda Sa Sumba Sa Yiba La Tene Zenji Paru the Zimba Zoba in Becherna, Yonson Zimba Mebe, Tantan, Tene Sangava La, Tene something Japaru the Zimba Zoba in Becherna, Jino Tadi Mebata, Kanga, Jitadi Mebata, Toba, Tene Tate. Tanda Satupala, Tini Hiraji Paru to Simba Zoba in Bechin, Niemo, but number top of Membeta, Niemo Batanji, Hiraji Paru to Simba, Niemo Batanji, Pongwa in Becherna, Tini and Garchin to Churba Niemo, but number top of my impetant, Churbarella, Tenon Pongwa Re, Tati Satupa.
So this morning we talked about the obscurations that hide the 37 factors of enlightenment, as well as the obscurations that obscure the 10 levels, or the 10 paramitas. And so those were, we went over those this morning, and now we have come to the obscurations of the 10 levels. So the obscurations of the 10 levels, these are the 10 levels from the first level of truly joyous to the 10th level, the clouds of Dharma. And so on each of these levels, we practice a different of the, or there's primarily a different paramita. So for each of the levels, there is one of the 10 paramitas. And so in this way, for the first level, the completely joyous, there is the paramita of generosity. For the second level, there is the paramita of discipline, and so forth, up to the 10th level. And so here, starting with the first level, in order, they're taught in the stanza 14 of the second chapter. The universal meaning, the superior meaning, the supreme causally compatible meaning, the meaning without any clinging, the meaning of beings not being different, the meaning that it is not afflicted and not pure, the meaning of lacking separation, the meaning without decrease or increase, and the support of the four masteries. And so here, the first level, on the first level, we see the ultimate Dharma nature as it is, and we see that meaning pervades everything. So it's the universal meaning. So we see that on the first Bodhisattva level. On the second Bodhisattva level, we perfect the transcendent discipline, and so in that way we overcome the opposite of that, which is broken or weakened discipline. So that's the superior meaning of overcoming the broken, the bad discipline. The third level is, on the third level, the paramita of patience is perfected, and so this is the supreme causally compatible meaning. So it's the supreme meaning that is compatible with its own cause, and that is the paramita of patience, which is perfected on that level. On the fourth level, the transcendent diligence is perfected. And so this is the meaning without any clinging. And so there is no clinging of any kind at this point on that level. And so this is the meaning without any clinging. On the fifth level, the paramita that is perfected is that of dhyana, or meditative concentration. And in that level we realize that beings do not have any different, the continua, or the beings of different beings, are not different or not separate. And then on the sixth level, we perfect the transcendent prajna, or transcendent intelligence. And so in this way, all of the afflictions are completely purified. And so they have all been completely eliminated. And so in this way, the impediment to this level is having any afflictions. And so here they are completely purified.
Tene ta te jesula sadambala tabji paru tu tsimba zopa yembe cherna tadi me petani de ta tando tapasam zopa ta moala tene gewe zawa pelkin jeba yembe cherna tadi me petani ta tene sa jeba ta guba ni de nyomdo naurela tene sa jeba la melonji paru tu tsimba zopa tong sa guba la topji paru tu tsimba zopa yembe cherna topasam zopa tong ta paru tu tsimba tenzo topasam zopa tong tenba yembe cherna tene trewa mepa tong pelwa mepa tamji pelrip mepa tabi ke tante jetawa yemto topa tang tene sa joba la tene tanda yihiji paru tu tsimba ta yi konda tenba tardo zopa rela te onjorne ta tamji la rangden tong yenden pensong zopa la onjorwa namba ye nes jorba re ta sa joye mentembe so pongwa la tenen debu tope ke cholte sungwan zeba rela te jeso chuji yen la maripa nyemon jeme driba jo sa ju menten so namje nyembo tong sa yin no se 다 디게 빵자 사주 된주게 빵자데 간데레세나 다 조 되네 추지 예엄 추니제 넬루데 검 지타와긴도 zeit난게 요아라라 데 지타와긴도 zei 운디 제살 되네 렘지 빵자 된조 빵난게 요아라라 빵자 된조 빵도 되라 빵자를 쩌르도 넘버 2에 베나니 다 녜모 베드바다 tene hizi dribate nomba kyo hizi dribate nomba ni yebenane ta tanda ndi kapje dribate kandel sungu yoware sena maripa nyemonti mainpa hizi dribage nomba de nomba kyo de satyo mentimbe so nam ki pangi yoware la tene te pangzi ge nyembo de satyo ge tuji la yubi yihi de do tene topati panangi yorela nyembo tone sayin no soin.
Now, on the seventh level, we perfect the paramita of skillful means, and so, as we said this morning, this is the skillful means is to make dedications in order to increase our merit, and so this is the meaning of lacking separation, realizing that things are not separate. And then the 8th and the 9th levels are taught together. So on the 8th level, we perfect the transcendent aspiration. And on the 9th level, we perfect transcendent power. And so because of the power of the strength of the practice of the transcendences have become so strong that there is the meaning of being without decrease or increase. And so there is nothing that is taken away or decreased. There's nothing to increase. So everything has been completely realized. The meaning that there is nothing to increase or nothing to decrease has been completely realized. And the 10th level is the level where we perfect transcendent wisdom. And so as I discussed this morning, and so when we receive that, when we achieve that level, we attain the support of the four masteries. And so this is the meaning that we have been achieved mastery over bringing benefit to ourselves and to others. And so in this way, there are these 10 different levels. And on each of these 10 different levels, their own impediments or their own obscurations are eliminated. And this is discussing how you attain the results of these different levels. Then the text continues in verse 16. The levels are the antidotes to the impediments of the 10 levels, ignorance of the Dharma expanse, the 10 unafflicted obscurations. And so here, what are these things that we eliminate over the course of the 10 levels? Well, generally, they are the obscurations that prevent us from seeing the Dharma nature fully. So generally, in the 10 levels, we see the Dharma nature, and that vision or that realization of the Dharma nature gets clearer and clearer and clearer over the course of the 10 levels as we eliminate the things that need to be eliminated. So there are different types of obscurations, but generally the obscurations can be subsumed in two different types. There are the afflictive obscurations, and there are the cognitive obscurations. So of these two, what we're talking about here is the ignorance of the Dharma expanse, the ignorance that does not fully understand the Dharma expanse, which is the 10 unafflicted obscurations. And so this is primarily talking about the unafflicted ignorance. So unafflicted ignorance, and this is a cognitive obscuration. So these are the different levels of the unafflicted ignorance that are eliminated over the course of the 10 levels. And so as we go through, and so as the wisdom of each of the levels develops within our beings, then that becomes the antidote that eliminates that obscuration.
Tene ta tige dripatinzo ta tanda jerdo tarvala dripaton gewasola dripatan tene ta tigendo tanda nyembola dripa tenom tene ta dripatenom domde ta kodewa surdu yona tene surdu de tembatela nyemon pa dripaton hizi dripani to ten Terna driba tamji deji nena drone zeta tela dom do tsur do yana kondo driba mambo tembare driba denzo suso nusim becerdo tembare la taka ndar dor du de tena tene deja hedon temu la soba nyemo bedriba tan deja hedon temu ngajal todo la soba la nyemo bedriba se yore te main pe namto rakpa singa gepa la soba tenzola hizi driba ni to temba te tela hizi driba sege yore tela nyemo ba yo mare te inaya tene chuni je tan thonala dribgi yore ta te tabu nyemo ba driba to hizi driba ni bo tina to driba thonji te tene ndu yore la te ndu yaba yimbe cherna ta pangza driba te no pangu yore pangza driba te nam remji ta tanda semni je tando chuni je tando gomna tini tesi nene trolwarnde se tini tanda ndo tardo se na chuchi yen tombani je tando gomba gomne tini ta tingan du chorte remji nyemo ba driba to hizi driba te remji pangwarin jirwada teni ta tejendo ndo ne ta tanda jashin chepe je ondo sena dewarki bi nimbo te ta chuji yen te sarton sondun juba teni ta tomba chomba mahimpa teni sarchatan chepa sarcha yi hijinam batan chepa te gambe teni nyemo badribata hizi dribate le trowande yore teni sonho doje tipata je ina teni tekar ta senje nelu gamne hine tombo hine gam teji so lontong ko tingen je jella chi ta te truso yam jella jerem gambala so go ne teni nyemo badribata hizi dribate to talwa driba sapa driba le trolwa yungi yore la teni tarwa togi yore Thank you, Udon ta number jeba le triple leur jeba ta te ngaranso cerdo susuci o tamjela driba yore ta te la cerdo ngaranso kan sege yore se no digba ta driba sege yore la tene dikpa te tanda xiaojong go ne jang go pa ta ngarang zu lenge ba so ga ba te la ko yo dripa te nyemo ba xiu chen bo ye ba do nang to ra ba xiu chen bo ye ba ti tene nyam len tar chen ba yong yo ma re la te pang ba ge cher do tene chu ni je ne lu gam ba to se ni je ne lu gam ba to tene yiram ja la jeram gam ba la tene dripa te le drol ge yo re la tene teacher na dripa pang ba ge chur te tem ba re.
So here we have this, today we've discussed the different types of obscurations, the obscurations of liberation, the obscurations of the 10 of virtue and so forth, and the obscurations of the antidotes. And so these are all of what have been taught. And if we just sort of summarize all of these, then there's the verse 17. They are taught to be the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. And those are all obscurations. When they are extinguished is liberation. And so generally there are a lot of different obscurations that we have talked about today. But to sort of, and the reason why we've talked about them all is so that we can identify them all. So that is why they have been taught. But in order to summarize them, you can say that basically there are those obscurations such as the desire, aversion, and delusion within our beings, the afflictions within our beings. And those are the afflictive obscurations. So that is the greed, aversion, delusion, jealousy, envy, and so forth. And then there are also obscurations that are not like that. They are the coarse thoughts, all of the torpor and agitation in our being. And these are what we call the cognitive obscurations. They're not afflictions, but they do obscure us and prevent us from seeing the Dharma nature as it is. And so these are the two types of obscurations that contain all the obscurations, the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. And so when they are eliminated, these are all obscurations that we need to eliminate because they prevent us from seeing the nature of the mind or the Dharma nature or whatever. And when they are extinguished, then that is what we call liberation. So in terms of the sutras, what is said is that we meditate upon emptiness and the Dharma expanse. And through meditating upon this, we can gradually make these manifest, and then we will be free of all the cognitive, or the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. And then, if you think about the sutras, or the sutra teachings of the lineage of vast action, then there's the emphasis on Buddha nature. And so here you meditate upon the emptiness, but that emptiness is not just mere emptiness, it's emptiness that is also endowed with the aspect of clear wisdom. So we meditate upon that, and then through that we eliminate the afflictions and the obscurations, and so we eliminate the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. In the secret mantra Vajrayana, we meditate upon the nature of the mind. First we do tranquility meditation, then we develop insight meditation, and as a helper for that, we also do the creation phase, visualization practices of a deity, and so forth. And through doing this, we eliminate the afflictive and cognitive obscurations, and by eliminating those, we attain the liberation. And so that we attained liberation. And so here, this is what is taught in this second chapter. The second chapter, the chapter on obscurations from the treatise of differentiating the middle and extremes. And so generally, what this chapter teaches is that, the obscurations that we ordinary individuals have. And so we talk about misdeeds and obscurations. So misdeeds are something that we can purify by confessing. That's the bad actions, the bad karma, our bad actions. That's how that should be understood. But when we talk about obscurations, then these are the afflictions, the strong afflictions we have within our being. They're the coarse thoughts. They are and so forth that prevent us from actually attaining liberation and omniscience. And so, in this way, they obscure the Dharma nature. They obscure the nature of the mind, and so forth. So we need to eliminate them. Otherwise, we will not be able to bring our practice to its ultimate result. And so that is why these obscurations have been taught here.
Tene ta thige dip leu te sone ta leu sumba te tekona ni je leu rela ta te la leu tangbu ge korwa ton nyangin lin de bin seni de ne nengon da bo de kare de se na ta tan da ngaram so diba tene tarba ma so pe chin de diba tene nyam to pa che par ji jilla ma ji we chin de diba yo rela tene diba tin so salvor tene 다 드바 된조 빵구기 요아를 드바 된조 간디스 빵기 요아르세나 데네 데코나니 제넬루세 데코나니 제넬루세도 뎀베 네탄데 답변나 물럼다보지 땅나 물럼 장보용 땅그래 물럼 냠바용 땅그래 디 물럼데 코나 장보데 물럼베 기보지 동나요 델 뎀바시라 요마레 tene malam dupoji tangnayo tel demba kaya yo mare kariri sena ni sepe neka te koran nelu ndabore malam jen neka ten tulbare la ta ngaran so dripa ten so tulbare pambe ke tabla khandi gugre sena tene nelu ten demba te to guge yo la tene tel te kona nye sunge yo te kona nye te la cherdo ta tanda 다 자가르 케도 침보통지 다 산지 진도에 놓는 소나 제르도 뎀바니 송요와라 군줍 그 뎀바도 덴동 그 뎀바니 다티노네 덴동 그 뎀바데 또고요 감더 다 사모타지 또 자신체 지니가나네 자신체 비제지 온도세나 데네 파파 토미 다 로벤 이니 라소 공바도 자자 잠방게 공바다도세나 데네 군토 용줍 섬 숭게요와라 tene mada pe chade kunta don yon ni ta pe chade yonru de number som sunge yorela ta ti ge tene ta ti ne seni som telan seni som shuge yore seni som je ta de to pe che to te kona ni je leo de tembar te kona ni je ne lu khande imbate ta te la tombo te la tene seni number jo tembar te kona ni number jo tembarela tene tsawa tseni kandi imbata tanda kunta yongru song tseni tene kunta yongru song je tekona te nelu tsawa tseni tekona tsenche malo tseni ta tene tsenche malo ban tseni ta tanje nelu ngo kandi imba tene drebu joye tekona drebu kandi imba to jo kandi imba rakpa kan imba to tawa kari imba rakpa ta tate yons trapa kandi imba number topi yul kandi imba ta tini teda duna kondo doa ta iye nan seni kandi iye pa ta tini tela kepa kepe te kona ni ta kepa number jo uni ten yo are la kepa number jo na dot tawe nimbo ta te tabu te kona ni jenelu te dot tawe nimbo re.
And so that was the chapter on obscurations, and following this comes the chapter on suchness. Now, so first, in the first chapter, we had the teachings of the characteristics of samsara, nirvana. Then we had the teachings on how it is, how we can, on the obscurations that obscure that. And so now we need to know how it is that we can actually clear away those obscurations. What is it that we need to do to eliminate the obscurations? Well, in general, what we need to do to eliminate the obscurations is to realize the true nature as it is. For example, like when we have a dream, we can have good dreams and we can have bad dreams. But if we have a good dream, then there's not a whole lot of reality to that good dream. And if we have a bad dream, then there's nothing real about that either. Because really the nature, the real way, is actually our waking state. And the dream is just confusion. And so, in the same way, our obscurations are just confusion. And so, in order to eliminate them, we need to understand the real nature of how things are. And so, that is what we need to realize. That is the suchness that we need to realize. And so, here, in terms of the teachings of the Indian, teachings of the Indian masters and the Buddha's teachings in the sutras, there are taught to be two different truths. There is the relative truth and the ultimate truth, and it is the ultimate truth that we need to realize. There also are different traditions in the Mahayana. There is the lineage of the profound view, and the lineage of vast action. So the lineage of vast action is this lineage of this treatise, the lineage of Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and so forth. And in this lineage, there is a great stress on the three characteristics, or the three natures, the characteristics of the imaginary, the dependent, and the wholly established that we had in the first chapter. The imaginary, the dependent, and the wholly established. And so the natures that are impure are the imaginary and the dependent. And the nature that is pure is the wholly established. So these are the three characteristics. And so we need to realize these characteristics. And so that is why this chapter, the chapter on suchness, is taught. So it's basically teaching us the suchness, or the nature of how things are. And so first in this suchness chapter, it begins saying the root and characteristic subject. So the root suchness, that is the basic, these basic characteristics. And then the characteristic subjects, what are the characteristics of the three natures? And then the unmistaken characteristic is the true nature of how they actually are. Then resultant and causal suchness. So what is it that is a cause? What is it that is a result? What are the results like? What are the causes like? Then there is the suchness of the coarse and subtle. So what is the coarse phenomena? What are the subtle phenomena? What are they like? Then there is the consensual, or the consensus. What is it that we know of from consensus? Then there is the pure object. So what do we mean by a pure object? Then the meanings of containing or subsuming the meaning. So how is it that we can sort of condense or summarize the meaning? And then also the meaning of distinguishing. How can we distinguish different classifications and so forth? And then there is the suchness of the 10 types of knowledge. So there are 10 different types of knowledge. So and these are the antidotes for the view of the self. So we have a view of a self-personality view, and these 10 types of knowledge are their antidotes.
Tenden ta te jeso ta tanda ta te konani som ngo ta te lan sen yin ngo ni som mi ong sung yo la ti ngo ni som je ta te ngo ni som je ne lu de tempe kap so ngo ni som to mi tong ye jong kona main tong ye dong me te kona te ngo ni ne som de ta chi tang ge ngo ni som yo re kunta yung ru song re tene te na ne kunta te khandi jire se na tangpo ne madrupa takpa mepa ta mepa takpa korang ngo rangin ki madrupa te kunta ji ngo re ta kunta ngaran su loi te lan zai ne chulge yo re ma to tan yo ma re ta yewang senke te ta jewang ha me le la so ba la te ne le da kambe ba cha la te ne no hyar ge yo re la no hyar wa te ye chung te khona tar do demba yo ma re ye chung non ge yo re no tar do demba to yo ma re tene ta tanda te yewang ge se ni re la tene ta ti je so yong ru ge se ni yong ru te ta tang ba re la ye tong me te khona te se tene tati ni tong ngo la ye pa ta zunzi ni ji ngo la me pa te khona te tati rangin ji ta che no hyar ge yo re zina hyar ge yo ta tanda me pa te tanda yons zunzi ni bo te yons ma tu pa te me pa re tene zunzi ni bo te yons ma tu ngo che yo re zina yo ye pa te khona te ngo ni som ngo ni ne som de tati ngo ni som re Tene ta tela ngoni ne somtunde.
So these three characteristics are sometimes called the three natures. And so here what's taught is the suchness of the three natures that are characterized. And so it's so this teaches the nature or the characteristics of these three natures, the way they are. And so here it reads, the three natures are always nothing, something but not so, and suchness that is something and nothing. These are held to be the three natures. And so generally we have these three natures. They're the imaginary, dependent, and wholly established. So when we say the imaginary nature, well, what do we actually mean? Well, the imaginary nature from the very beginning has never been established as anything. It's always been, it's never been established as anything. That is the imaginary. It's something, we grasp at things at being something, but actually that's just confusion. There's never really been anything there. So it's the nature that is always nothing. And then something but not so, that is the dependent nature. And so the dependent nature means that out of the power of our karma from previous lives and out of the power of our imprints, there are various different appearances that happen. And they appear, they're there, they're something. They exist, but they're not so. They aren't exactly what we think they are. And so that is the characteristic of the dependent. And then the third is the wholly established. And so the wholly established is the ultimate truth. And so this is the suchness that is something and nothing. And so in this way, the essence that is empty of dualism is something. It exists. But the perceiver and the perceived that we grasp at do not exist. They are nothing. So this is basically saying, are there appearances that occur? Yes, there are. They do occur. But but they do not exist as we think they do. So there are the perceiver and perceived that we grasp at, but those are not true. But the fact that, but there is something that is absent of that perceiver and perceived, does that exist? It does. And so in this way it is suchness that is something and nothing. So these are the characteristics of the three natures. These are held to be the three natures.
다 되게 근도 용도 some 뭐니 some 진이 돼 늘라 당보 주동 공사동 생긴데 근도가 온데세나 드니 주지 다동 공사가 다세 다티 메발라 예번 출기요라 드니티 근도가 내루데 데타르도 마드 버토나 주동 공사가 돈도 받디 살와다 Tene yeong kan tseni te to na tsong tseni te zunga to don zamba don tse zunga ki yor don non zimbe senji nambala sharki yuwa re te yinna ya te zunga tar do madrupa to zamba tar do madrupa nelu te yinbe cherna yeong kan nelu xie na te zunzing drondo pa to kurwande pa te salgire ta yondu kan nelu te to na ta te yedong mepa drondo pa se ta te upu jesu trupa yepala drondo pa yung yo marela tene mepa chuni ge nelu tene mepa yung kurwata pa te yung yo mare teacher na yepa tong ne mepa tangbo drondo pa tong kurwande pa tawa ta kongshi ne ne menjongwa ta te ta seni samje nelu te chetawa yendo kongki shi na tene te drondo tong kunde tenzu yung yo marela tene te menjongwa te 다 티콘도 용용도 손지 테코나니 지세니 소미자
건다티 샤몬테가 사보 중마송
나
샤몬게데 순증게 코데 메바데 데 사보 중마송 샤몬게 가서
용 단다 종동 종화도 동자
송원즈는 그래
세종 열동 세종 열 따르도 농이요래 논즘베센 따르도 농이요래 대하나 세종 열도 trobiyo mare 논즘베센 테 trobiyo mare 데 trubme pa imbe cherna 세종 열도 논즘베센 예파르 드론도 바다 데네 메팔 크로아타 바테 칸디데세나 단단 통기요래 노아티 메팔 크로안데 바 용기요 mare
So following this is the explanation of the characteristics of the three natures. So it reads, in these, when the views that exaggerate or denigrate phenomena or individuals, the perceiver, a perceived and perceiver, and existent and non-existence are known, they do not occur. This is the characteristic of suchness. So in these three characteristics, when there are views that exaggerate or denigrate phenomena or individuals. So when we're talking about the imaginary, we're talking about views that sort of exaggerate the idea of there being phenomena and individuals. Generally, phenomena and individuals lack any self. They do not truly exist. But we sort of exaggerate them and think of them as being something. But actually, they are not established as they are. So when we see the suchness of that, we realize that they do not exist in that way. And also, we don't need to denigrate the idea that they still continue to appear. Then for the characteristic of the dependent, it's when you come to know the views that exaggerate the perceiver and the perceived and the perceiver. So when we realize the characteristic of the dependent, we see that there are the perceived objects that appear to us. There is the perception of an internal perceiver as well, or the appearance of an internal perceiver, and they do appear, and they appear in this way, but they are not true as they appear. And so there's no exaggerating of them as being something that is true. Yet there is also no denial of them in saying that there is no appearance of either a perceived object or of a perceiving mind. And then there is the wholly established. And so this is the views that exaggerate or denigrate existence and non-existence. And so the existence of the views that exaggerate existence are those that say that that phenomena exists and that they truly are there. We see that nature and see that phenomena do not really exist. But also we see that the Dharma nature itself is not just plain old nothingness. It's not blankness. And so we're not denying the Dharma nature in that way. And so in this way, when we know these views that exaggerate or denigrate the existence and the non-existence, then when we know them, when we understand them, then we will no longer engage in that sort of exaggeration and denial. And so when we realize that is the characteristic of realizing the suchness of the imaginary, the dependent, and the wholly established.
Tene ta te jeso dembe tante tembarela ta te la mato tene meren ton jegin jibin seni ton tiji tima meren te zawe kona korem yen sunde ta kunta yung jerdo ngoni sam kunta yung rup sam te la mato pare ta sumka te mato parangin de mato pa imbe tene kunta kanti sini mato pare sena kunta koran rangin ji madrupa me peten imbe chena mato pare tene nipa yung de kanti sini mato pa ina je yin ji bin seni jin ta tanda nga ran zo no ma tong ji tongbo ji tene pardo ne taman jing ro ge yo re la de ta yung de je yin ji bin seni jin ba ta tene ta ti yung ru de la ngu su ma ta ba yo ma re de ngu su ma ta ba me na ya ta te tong sul zom do su su ji ne ka sa trama tang je pe yung ru je da tene te tarwa tong tam jin jembe kompong to ka sa trama me pe sen ni jin don de yung ru je ta te ta ti tombo ti ji yin ba la ji ma trama me ban jorwa tene tsawe te kona ni korem jin do kun to yung ru som te ma to pa tan re ta dunghal je sen ni jin ma to dunghal ge sen ni jin kun to yung ru som te dunghal jin de sen ni jin de la dunghal te kunta la dunghal kandi resi na dunghal tong de lemba re tang ko korwe chunong ko onge dunghal tamchi tong de lemba tabu tang teni yeon gan seni de kandi resi na yeon de dunghal gan seni tang demba ta koran rangin ke dunghal jin namba tang demba ji re teni ta tanda yonrup de dunghal tam dreba kandi yo resi na dreba yin dun deba de dunghal pompe ke rangin tong demba deba yin imba te ta ti den to yoba number yoba re
Following this comes the presentation of the meaning that's true, or the true meaning. And so here, this is the second half of verse 5, starting at the second half of verse 5. The meaning of impermanence. Actually, I have to retranslate this a little bit, so listen up. The meaning, and I'll go over again this in the study session. So the meaning of impermanence is the meaning of non-existence, the characteristic of arising and perishing, and the meaning of stainless, stained and stainless, the three root suchnesses respectively. For suffering, grasping the characteristics and connection, which is held to be otherwise. So the first one, the meaning of impermanence, is the meaning of non-existence, the characteristic of arising and perishing, and the meaning of stained and stainless. And so here we have the three natures of the imaginary, dependent, and the wholly established. And all of these are impermanent. And so the meaning of this is, well, how is it that the imaginary is impermanent? Well, it's the meaning of non-existence. The imaginary doesn't truly exist. And so because it doesn't truly exist, we can say it's impermanent. It's not permanent. Then the dependent, how is it that the dependent is impermanent? Well, the dependent has the characteristic of arising and perishing. So it's just the nature of appearances, that appearances arise and then they perish, or they stop or fall apart. So this is they arise and perish. And so in this way, the dependent has this characteristic of rising and perishing, the characteristic of being impermanent. And then there is the wholly established. And the wholly established is not in itself actually impermanent, but in the way it appears to us ordinary individuals, there is the meaning of stained and stainless, which means that for us ordinary individuals, there is the phase of the stained suchness, the stained wholly established, where it's obscured, and then there is the ultimate phase of the unstained, where all of the obscurations have been removed. And so at first it is stained, and then later it is unstained. And so in that way we can say it is impermanent. And so these are the three root suchnesses respectively, the three root suchnesses being the imaginary, dependent, and the wholly established. And then following that, there is the discussion of suffering. All three of the natures are also suffering. And the translation here should read, for suffering, there is grasping the characteristics and connection, which is held to be otherwise. And so here, how is it that that the imaginary is suffering? Well, it's suffering because of grasping. We grasp at these confused appearances. We grasp and we take them up upon ourselves, and that is suffering. Then there is the dependent. And so how is it that the dependent is suffering? It's by its characteristics, the characteristics. It has the characteristic of being suffering. And then the third one is the wholly established. And the way that the wholly established is that, here Rinpoche explained it differently than I translated. So as Rinpoche explained it, so is that it is separated from that. It is otherwise from the suffering. And so that is how we say it is connected. It is connected by being otherwise from the suffering. And so in this way, this is presenting the three natures in terms of the true meaning.
Tene tati matapa tanto duk ngalo ke tani temparela ta tomba ni jitan tembatela tene ngumi tengu main ta ronhin ji ne tombarde seni mebe dami don te don menten seni don rong seni tembayen sunde ta kunta te tomba ni de kandere sena kunta ronhin ji madu bayin be na ngumi de ngubo me bayin be na ronhin ji tombare yon tombani re kandere se na ngupo mai ngumai be ta khorang no tardo ton ge no hyar ge yore de no hyarwa tardo madu bayin be na ngupo ngumai pa ta teni yonrup tombani yen de ronjin ji tombai berde rangin ji ne tombai ba ngo rangin ji madu ngor khorang seni de rangin ji tombani ji rangin de ge yore ta de ji so do me pa tem parela seni mebe do meba tene konto seni mebe do meba rela tene konto ngo de toni maru bayin bechena tene yong ngo de tedo mentin becheni tene dog seni tedo mentin ben seni bechena do meba re Tene yongrup kan senyi te rang kan senyi ngusu toni ka rang yin pe chana rang kan senyi tenpa yin te tene tanda do mebe nambala tenpa re tenpa yin soni.
So that's the truth of the impermanence and the suffering. And then is the emptiness. And so here it says the non-existent, that which is not a thing, and the naturally empty are held to be empty. Since it has no characteristics, it is selfless. Its characteristics are incompatible with that, and its own characteristics are taught. So when we talk about the imaginary is empty because it is non-existent. It is not established as anything, so it is non-existent, and therefore it is naturally empty because it is non-existent. The dependent is non-existent because it is not a thing. It is not actual, actually, I should maybe say, because it is not actual. So, of course, we see things. We see them, but they appear, but when they appear, they are not as they seem to be. So it is not actual. It is not really how it is. It is not established in that way, and so therefore it is also emptiness. The wholly established is naturally empty. So by its own characteristics, by its own nature, it is just emptiness. That's what the wholly established is. And so because it can't be established, it is naturally empty. It is also held to be empty. So that is the truth of the emptiness, or the meaning of emptiness. Then following that, there is a discussion of the meaning or the truth of selflessness. And so how is it that these three natures are selfless? Well, the imaginary is selfless because it has no characteristics. It is selfless. So since it cannot be established as anything, it has no characteristics, and therefore it is selfless, or lacks the self. Then the dependent, because its characteristics are incompatible with that. Its characteristics are incompatible with having any self actually present there. And because its characteristics are incompatible with the presence of a self, it is selfless. There is no self there. And then for the wholly established, its own characteristics are taught. This is the specific, the wholly established's own characteristic, that it's just emptiness. Because it is emptiness, it's naturally selfless as well. And so that is its own characteristics. And so in this way, the truth of selflessness has also been taught.
Jepati Tesir Dungal Dembrande Pocha Tonaka Ninjong Matrawayu taking the Oni Doni Mechi Tumahiwani Dunde Sedu Tati Yaju Kondu Tempati Dungalji Tempatemparel Matapaton Tanda Haloka Kumage Matapatan Tenetendo Tijiso Tomba Mata Dungalwaton Tomba Don Domeba Tembarella Tige Sekomba Tombo de Tigin Jodovandaboji Desir Dungal Dembrande Kunda Yung Dungal Dembedon Balayo Tati Jisukunjung Demba Tembarella Tene Tak Kunjung Demba Kunta Kunjung Demba Kandi Dogresena Kunta Pocha Topji Tene Kunta the Younger Yovarella Tene Kunjung Dembare Yeon de Yenje Ledo Niemon Bonge Noa de Hargi Yovarella Tekanin Jore Kanin Jon Tene Ta Yondrup de Kunjung Dom Matalion Te Yeno Yondrup Nelu de Rong Wolan Jurwayo Mare Suadella Te Kunjung with them Senita the Moni some the Kunjung with them Senita Tempata Teji Sungoni some te Tatanda Gop de Senita Tempate Moni don't ni meje Tama Hiwani Sunde Sunde Takunta te Taranji Tomba in Bicherna Tenete Hiwarilla Tene Tati Yendo Yeon de Nis Mecheve Nelu in Bicherna Zunzi Nis Mecheve Mo in Bicherna Tene Gopare Gop Dembare Tene Yondu de Tama Hiwa Tama Hiwa Seni in Bicherna Tene Tati Tabu Tene Tanda Yonsu Trawa Yondu Yondu Gayan, the Hini, the Tama Yonsuto, so Tongu Gichani, Nis de la Tsima Tracha and Gopangwin. That the Yonsu, Jitanga, Nonchate, Tene, Tonchate, Ni Varela, Tonchate, Musutamahi Varela, Tonchate, Yota, ranking Madruba in Bechena, the Tonchate, your race, wings.
Kunjung Dembala Kazo, Yonduk Gitende, Kunjung
Yonduk, then
Yonduk Gitin Kazo, Kazo Madal and Dation Oda.
Madal Wayo, take no, soon de la Kunjung Dembate, Madalwa, Madal Nayo, Chuni, Yonduk, Jumo, Telanjurame, but Yamdo, Yapate, Kunjung Lindo, Yapata, take and the Neba.
And so then, continuing with the rest of verse 8, for that reason they are also held to be the truth of suffering, imprints, the origin and not separated as well, the essence, the two that do not arise, and the pacification of stains, which is held to be twofold. And so here, the first line, for that reason they're held to be the truth of suffering, is sort of a summary of the previous section. So in the previous section, we were taught the four characteristics of the truth of suffering: the impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. And so this is teaching how the three natures have all of these characteristics, and therefore also the truth of suffering. Then following this, there comes the teaching on the truth of the origin. So how is it that the imaginary is the truth of the origin? Well, it's because of imprints, that is sometimes translated as habitual tendencies. The imprints are part of the origin of our suffering, and they are also they are imaginary. So that is how the imaginary is the truth of origin. Then the dependent is the truth of origin because the dependent arises out of the power of the afflictions and karma. And so both of these are the truth of origin. Then there is so that is the origin here, as it says in the text. And then not separated as well, it says. This is about the wholly established. The wholly established is not separated from the truth of the origin because it is, in its essence, it never changes, and so it is always present. It is always together with the truth of the origin. It is naturally present with it. And so that is the truth of the origin. And then the next two lines teach the truth of cessation. So how is it that the essence of the cessation, that the three natures are the essence of cessation? Well, the imaginary nature by its own very nature is empty. It is not true by itself. It is empty, and so therefore it is naturally also cessation. Then the two that do not arise refers to the dependent. And so the dependent means, this is the causal Nimike said because Golden Becasura
Zunzini, Young Capsula,
So in the dependent, the perceiver and perceived, the perceiver and perceived, do not arise, they cease. And so that is how the dependent is also the truth of the cessation. And then the wholly established is the truth of cessation because it is the pacification of stains, which is held to be twofold. And so in this sense, there is the basis for the pacification of stains, and there also is the analytic cessation, which is their cessation. Or in other words, if you talk about it, there's the way that they appear, and then there's the empty aspect. And so the empty aspect is by its very nature, it is cessation. And then that the appearances is also naturally empty. It is by its own nature, it is not established as anything. And so they also are the truth of cessation.
Tene ta teji so lamje demba rela lamje demba te ta kunto yong ru som de lamje demba lando surte kunto te gen seni yong su hi ni tenen debula zen debu topa in becherna kunta lamje demba in batan yon genzeni de yon zunzin jenton herwate pangne tenen ta lam debu topa in becherna yon lamje demba in batan tenen yonru de tenen topne ngan samdo sawala tenne tenen tartu kun debu topa in becherna yonru lamje demba de lamje demba in ba yon topa heba yin.
And so next is a discussion of the truth of the path. So how is it that the imaginary, the dependent, and the wholly established are the truth of the path? Well, the imaginary has the characteristic that if we completely know it, then we realize that it is not established as anything, and and we're diligent about our practice. Then we can attain the ultimate result. And so, in this way, the imaginary is also the truth of the path. And then there is the dependent, and this is eliminating. So eliminating the perceiver and perceived. So eliminating the perceived object and the perceiving mind. Then by eliminating those, we attain the result. And so in this way, the dependent is also the truth of the path. And then the wholly established is also the truth of the path, because by manifesting achievement, so by achieving and manifesting this achievement, then we attain the final result. And so that, in that way, it is also the truth of the path. And so in this way, the three natures of the imaginary, dependent, and wholly established are the truth of the path.
Kunta yung the rapa kandi imbata, chawa kandi imbatem barela, tini togong juntin tizam, tena yatna, that's all. So, tini trawa nankinda buyana, trawa naruche.
Next is the teaching about how the three natures are either coarse or are subtle. And so maybe that's enough for this afternoon. We can leave it here. But if anyone has any questions, please come and ask. Do we have a microphone for? Okay, there's a microphone for questions. Maybe come forward and make a line at the microphone. That's probably the quickest.
Rinpoche, I think this has to do with cognitive obscurations, and it's actually from a previous commentary that I was studying earlier, in which you were talking about when somebody has some stability in their practice, and the term that was used was the dregs. And David, you used undertow?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. And so my question is, because you said in this commentary that this was quite dangerous if not identified. And so my question is, how do you identify this in your practice when you believe that you have some stability? And once identified, what is the antidote?
Dilane sheje de bekola de kaso Rinpoche gedashe shindachi na ro karisumire sina kaso nyaman chebe kaso and dela kaso ogyun yures ogyun ro ogi junrabo marbe nyaman chebe kaso de kaso nambo chawo ge ogi junrabo oju de yoro Dila kaso de peninga cao de lumazina de ninga cao yore jawo songdo Dela de ogyu de kaning uzin gore de uzin nibo ganteng gore
Onju de nomtu chawa raboje nomtu chawa de ngu mazin ne tini onju gununga nanto chawa de ngu mazin tingon de yen son raboje na ta dusin trolan rabo dogo yore la de nyenga chembo ta di dingen zen de la parchi chege yore o ta di onju de nesap chembo yin song yore, tea tamji nanda, song yore la, tinitela nyembo kanti tengo resena, tinitela tenhi poi salbuji, tempa, tini samgaratan tempa sam, soja chimpu tea tamji nanda, tempa samgaratan tempa sam, tempa tan higin salbuji, tela top na wiyo pa ngardan jepa, zawani unju nambala mahiro wachi gugi yore.
So these dregs, or this undercurrent, it can also be translated as, this is like the continuum of really subtle thoughts that we just don't, when we don't recognize them, then we sort of get distracted by them, we follow them. And so there's this danger that we'll just end up wasting our time instead of meditating. And so this is a real problem for our meditation. And so they can be difficult to deal with, and so in the instruction manuals it says that we have to be very, very careful about them. And so the antidote for these is mindfulness, awareness, and carefulness. And so we need these three, and they need to be, as is described in the meditation manuals for Mahamudra, we need to have mindfulness that is clear and forceful. So clear and forceful mindfulness means that it's really clear and sharp, and that it also has this really forceful quality, a lot of power to it. And we must not we absolutely must not allow ourselves to follow those or be caught up in this undercurrent. And so that is the antidote.
How is the virtue of generosity related to the path of seeing? Why is it connected to that particular bhumi?
Dilane kazo jimbe paru to chimba de tonam dan doe junsen karina tonam satambo tonam ge kapsula
tonam ge kapsula satambo la ndelba ge junsen de kandere sena paru de simba kyote rimba yendola da paru de tsaine tene tartsin ba ndogyo la tene satambo ra de gawa to ba kazola jimbe paru de simba de tangbo tene rimba yendar sarire la paru tu tsimba rire zogi yore la tela tene paru tu tsimba tangbo jimbe paru tu tsimba te satombo rato gawa la tartsingi yore.
The connection between the transcendent generosity and the first level, the level of completely joyous, is that as we go through the bodhisattva levels, we perfect each of the transcendences in turn. And then they become like the ultimate version of them. And so, when we attain the first level of the first level of complete joy, then at that point we perfect the first of the transcendences, which is generosity. And so then on each of the levels we perfect another of these, which means that we complete and perfect them. And so the first of the transcendences is generosity, and that's why it comes first. On the first level, I mean.
This is about words, Rinpoche. Thank you very much for your teaching. David, are you saying H-O-L-Y or H-O-L? Holy or holy?
Oh, it's with the W. One W, two L's.
Okay. So then, Rinpoche La, how can the absolute or dundam be wholly, completely established? Because established is a process that has no quality of existence or non-existence.
I'm not sure I understood the last part of your question.
When you're talking about something that is there and permeates everything, then it doesn't have to be established, it's just there.
Laso, de la yongdrup sheba de la Tidan de yongdrup de la dunda nebula ngujina de yongdrup shebe jusen kayana kayasuna de drupa drabo de ngar mebala drupa drabo gogores de yongdrup de tamshiru kyaba yene yuba drabo gogores de shebe jusen kayana
Sard kibanda bola kogmare yons drupa sedu tonjon maimba tomba de 자치당 그 용도 근세니 된 오랑긴지 동바래 동바래도 동봉 오데 매바 마인바 다가 지당 그랑 그 ndhija도 뱀동 마인바 세게 요라 동바텔라 동바 넘버 2 요래 넘가 동반다보지 얘나 드니 동바래 때 얘나에 텔 yentin kanyan yungu yo mare karire sena ko pempo rewa na kanyan tomba tongchung re tene yongzhub ke tomba te yongsu druppa impichirna sarwa ki cha yuwa re la sarcha te salwa ki cha yuwa re te salwa ki cha te ngupo rewe sena ngupo mare ngupo ranginji tomba re te inaya te mepa mare tene yepa anda buje la ngunzin pichirna yongsu drup se sungi.
When we say that it's the wholly established with a W, then what this means is not that we're newly establishing anything, but rather saying it's wholly established means that it's not just mere emptiness. It's the essence is of course naturally empty, but that naturally emptiness is not completely is not an inanimate emptiness, as I always say. It's not inanimate. When we talk about emptiness, there are sort of two types of emptiness. Like you have the emptiness of sky, of space. Space is empty, but it's not able to produce any qualities or anything like that because it's inanimate. It's just mere blank emptiness. Whereas the wholly established is the wholly or the completely established. That means that there is the clear aspect that is present. So what is this? This is, in essence, it is naturally empty. But that naturally empty is just not blankness or nothingness. It's like it's present, and so in this way, it's wholly established.
So, Rinpoche, I'm trying very hard to understand that. I think what you're talking about is the Shentong view at that point where it is empty of other. And my understanding of other is that it's empty of anything samsaric. So I'm trying to understand realization of that. Doesn't that mean that there are no aspects of samsara in that realization?
Derabo yanani yongdrup de shendongi tawa drabo marbe spena de yongdrup de kaza shengi tomba re kaisana jumsen kayo re sana de kaza kora ane korigi namba tamshe ge kaza tomba rese da derabo yana derabo totna dela ane kaza toba de an kaza korigi namba ganda an tomba drabo marbe
re tagara.
Yep, it's exactly that.
Rinpoche, this gradual path of the Mahayana is obviously very vast and many teachings and practice and stages of attaining realization. And in this gradual path, how best shall we sustain the momentum to continue? What is the best method?
Dela tepa chempo lamde kaso pe gya chempo rabodo dela kaso ane tempa ya mambo ne chue mambo yore nyamle mambo ya yore ne kaso ne sada rimpa mambo yore da rimpa de some kali ma drebe kaso de kaso de kande kyongores de kande gyun kande kyongore de kaso de gas malaya ke chere kande kyongore
다 데라 제르도 단다 자체와 노동 사파송호 숭기 와래라 데네 나란초 다 송호 도제 티피게 템바타르게 네톤지라 칸디난기 와래세나 투송게 테나 파파카슬라 데네 자체와 노르 장기 와래라 데네 냠링게 네라 멤버카슬라 데네 송 사파송호지랑 냠링난기 와래라 데네 사파송호지 냠링난 kapsula rimba yendola zidu teni ngarang nyomnyon tong sorwa ta tesam ta jwa la so ba mambo yungi warela di kap tna la teni jachewa ndoi no ti khale Zigna, Tini, Tig, O, Tinango, the Tindirinduga, Titi Inganduga, Sontat, Doganona, Hipa, Sa, Lam, Yentin, Tini, Tati, Ripa, number not of a song you are Latinitig, Lane about the Sabo, Yungi, you are Matu, Tujon, the Yamlino, Casaloson, Hot Doji, Tipelante, Yamlinana, Tini, Remji, Rang and Devote, Togi, you are Latini teacher, Naranzo Yamlina, Casaloson, Hot Doji, Tipichu, Yamlina, to some no capsule, Tini Jachi and Doilong, Tini Dota, thank you, Tankila, to some Nangi, teacher, Tini Jilla, Koma Coppa, take it Jilla Salvata in the Yungi.
Generally, when we do our practice, there are the vast sutra teachings and there are the profound teachings of the secret mantra. And so, generally, when we are in a place where the secret mantra has spread, how is it that we practice? Well, when we are doing our listening and contemplating, we study the vast sutras. But then when we come to the point of actually coming to the main points of the practice, we do the profound secret mantra as our practice. And so gradually then, as we do this practice, we have different experiences. We have different feelings, we have different doubts, and different questions that come up. And so when that happens, then we go back and we look at the teachings of the profound sutras and we say, okay, that's what this point is, that's what this is. We look here and it says, that's what the path is, that's what the levels are, these are the stages, this is how it goes, these are what the qualities are. And so in this way, it all becomes clear. But then we usually go back and we do our practice, as usual, the secret mantra practices. And so in this way, we gradually progress through them until we attain the results. So our practice is primarily the practice of the secret mantra Vajrayana, and our listening and contemplation is primarily of the vast sutras. And so in this way, we have the sutras and the treatises that we study. And when we do it in this way, they help each other. So with our practice and with our study, neither of them closes the door on the other. They each make each other clear.
Rinpoche, in the teachings of Maitreya, it seems that, particularly in this case regarding the imaginary, dependent, and wholly established, that everything is measured against the concept of whether it exists or not. It would help me to understand, although emptiness is very well explained, what is meant to exist, because that seems to be what everything is being measured against. And if nothing is found to truly be existing, is not existence itself also empty?
Chitan gyawa jambe chunga nala kaso de kunta shang yongzhu sumgi ngo nala chitan de ngaso chitan de shaja gaya pades de yu megi kacha de yupa rabo ne shagires de yuna rabo shagires de dawena chitan de tombagi sado tembe shungna ne tombani de gaya pades sabo shere in de kaso ne yupa se de gango jingore da ne yupa de chitan de kaso yupa de ran de tombani marbe
Yepa kanyamba te tombani re te yinaya yepa te mepa mayimpa. Ta me sine tendo to jeya dragoje yo ta perna ngaran so sena jeyo mepa dragoje la kona tene ndiga yo mare. Jeyo mepa tombani jerebe sine jeyo mepa tombani je mare. La jitang ngupur trupe tombani jerebe sine ngupur madrupe tombani jere te yinaya jeyo mepa tombani je mayimpa la kogi yo. Ni yepa mai mepa mai tan talin depa sungi yore tat perna umala soba nom jenone talin depa sungi yore la kamde yon de sena yondu de tombani re de yina yo mepa mai ba yon su tropa imba da buje
ne kaso yepa de mepa mai be
yepa de mepa mai
Of course, anything that exists is also emptiness. But when we say exist here in the context of talking about the wholly established, what we mean is that it's not nothing. And so it's not non-existence, it's not nothingness. And so existence here, or something, I translate the same word yupa as sometimes as something and sometimes as existence. The existence means not nothing or not non-existent. So when we talk about emptiness, of course things are empty, but that emptiness doesn't mean nothing at all. If we understand emptiness as meaning that it's just blank nothingness with nothing at all, that's not what it is. It is not just blank nothingness. But does that mean that it is something that can be established as a thing? It does not mean that. It is not established as anything, but it is also not nothing at all. And so generally, it's as it says in all the teachings, it's not nothing, not something, not existing, not non-existing. And so as it says in the teachings in the middle way, it is transcending any extreme. And so in this way, when we talk about the emptiness of the wholly established as being something or as existing, that just means that it's not absolutely nothing, not nothing at all.
Thank you for your teaching. Thank you for your translation. Rinpoche, going back to yesterday, is there a text that is the source of, or a place where we might find a further discussion of the 9 fetters? Simple compared to
Kasangara, Kasane, Kazo Kunjorgu Shera, Kunjorgura, De Shungana Shere.
Kunjurgode zo tanda ngamba de negna ngamba kongni tenju nam salvo samyore
Pena de la Kazo Kenju
da ngamba woma ngamba zeda ngamba kundu tenju.
So the texts where the 9 fetters are explained are in the Abhidharma texts, and so these are texts such as Jumipam's The Gateway to Knowledge, or in the texts on the Abhidharma from the lower vehicle, such as the Treasury of the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, or as well as in Asanga's summary or compendium of the Abhidharma. And so the Gateway to Knowledge has been translated. There's a good translation of the first 3 quarters of it that is available from Rangjung Yeshe publications. There has been some work on the Treasury of Abhidharma. I have a translation of Monk Dorje's commentary that will come out next year. Buy it, please. And study it. That's even more important.
The title of the text is Distinguishing the Extremes from the Middle, and I was wondering how that relates to what the commentary that is in the text. I mean, what Thrangu Rinpoche has been explaining.
Dela de shungi tsen la ne uta namche se de utan ta number chepa de da Rinpoche ge sumbe ge dun de ni da do kaina.
Udong ta number je ba senki de ta yongrup ge nelu khandi imba dan ta kun ta dong yong ge nelu khandi imba di zur temba re teacher na kunzu tong tendong ge nelu di susu sarvo kun ta khandi imba yong khandi imba yongrup khandi imba temba imba chena udong ta number je ba.
So when we say differentiating the middle from the extremes, the middle means the wholly established meaning, and the extremes means the imaginary and the dependent. And so for that reason, when we come to understand what is it that is the relative, what is the ultimate, what is the imaginary, what is the dependent, and what is the wholly established, then we can differentiate these middle and extremes.